Alright, so it's been a while since my last video. It has been hot as balls here, and to cap off my usual laziness, I got a bit of heat exhaustion and it rendered me a little bit retarded for a few days. But I'm back now and slightly less retarded, and if for some reason you're still around to hear what I have to say, I am super duper grateful. So let's go! Now, in my last video, I asked for a bit of feedback regarding whether or not I should actually carry on with the book review. And I got adequate feedback, which I'm really amazed by. And thank you so much to the Tree of Logic for sending some people my way. It's very much appreciated. From the feedback I got, I was able to see that the people that watched the video fell into 3 categories. 1, the type that enjoys a lolcow and has about 20 minutes to kill. This type of person tends to just watch a bit of content and get on with their day, which I reckon is most of YouTube. 2, people who are really nice in the comments and offered words of encouragement. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that. I hope I entertained you for at least 20 minutes. 3, those who had what I'd call an adverse reaction and didn't like what I had to say one bit. These comments made me realize that even though the book is a source of ridicule in my home, there are people out there who take it super serious and will go out of their way to defend it. I believe these people deserve to have their voices heard, so if you'll indulge me, I'd like to do a dramatic reading of their comments. I think it might be enlightening and it might bring us closer to the thought process of the kind of people who would defend this book, this pamphlet, this absolute desecration of an organism that once gave us oxygen. So here we go, first comment. It's your husband's last attempt towards saving your marriage. Crying laughing emoji, thumbs up emoji. This lady is proof that women can't comprehend facts when she said, this book doesn't say anything against women, but it has an energy. Means she doesn't like the way facts were told. Haha. Okay, first of all, it's a hell of a speculation on my marriage. Maybe I'm delusional, but I genuinely believe that my husband doesn't need relationship advice from a man who's so deep in the closet that if he takes another step back, he's going to find Narnia. Second of all, saying that all women can't comprehend facts because one random woman made a video on YouTube is kind of an indicator that you might be angry at some women in your life. I would advise you to maybe work that out and learn to forgive them, because you can add all the ha-has and all the crying face emojis you want. It doesn't hide the cope. Alright, second comment. The red pill is just game us 70s babies learned when I was a teen in the 90s. The game was cringe in the 90s and the red pill is also cringe, so I'm gonna take your word for it. What I learn is lead with good D and get girls to spend money on you. Myron has explicitly said that he doesn't concern himself with the pleasure of women and that a woman's orgasm is useless. I don't think he's leading with a good anything. You should read Shahrazad Ali books.
No, I don't think I will.
You make me want to buy the book. It sounds like old school game. Now listen, I think it's fair enough that you want to purchase the book, but I refuse to take responsibility for your purchase decisions. You should take ownership of that like a grown man. Wanting to spend money on a book because a woman make a video on the internet, it doesn't sound like game to me. But hey, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a 70s baby. I betcha your husband used some of that in the book to get you. Lol. You know, I seriously doubt my husband is getting any kind of advice on our relationship from this creature.
I mean, hey, bro, if you want to date a bunch of Shaniquas, go for it, man.
LaQuisha?
Yeah, like me and Fresh aren't really down with the brown like that.
Man.
We ain't Night Riders.
Nah,
so
bro, I'm good.
You know, sometimes if they're, Redbone, but like in general, me and Fresh don't dabble in the dark, if you know what I'm saying.
Yep.
And if he had, he wouldn't have ended up with me because I've never been on a sugar daddy website. But please, read the basic points, not the stuff on YouTube. You know, on some level, I kind of understand why you might want to separate the content of the book from the content of YouTube, but I think it's important to actually consider the source and just look at the whole picture. You see, Myron kind of reminds me of Fagin, from Oliver Twist. And Fagin was a sketchy character who had a ragtag team of orphans going around the city and pickpocket for him in exchange for shelter. And if these orphans didn't steal enough for him, he would beat them. Unfortunately, the orphans went along with this because they had no other choice and they were desperate for shelter and they had nowhere else to go. They were orphans and they were so desperate for shelter and food in the short term that they were willing to give up any semblance of a future as they were led down a hole into a life of crime. In a similar vein, I'd say Myron's audience are kind of the same because most of them are young men who feel forgotten and are desperate for belonging. And in the short term, having a community of people who feel like you do might be exhilarating. Myron might say some things that young men are able to identify with, but when you look at the whole picture, you see an opportunist using the plight of young men of today for his own personal gain. He does this by keeping his audience in a state of constant desperation and anger, and then he offers them an antidote that's actually just a really slow poison. His solutions might be beneficial in the here and now, but the more the messaging is ingrained, the more self-destructive it is in the long run. Sure, he tells men not to be bitches, and that's great, but that message is also wrapped up in things like this.
We used to run trains on white girls.
Choo choo. Shout out Robin Hood.
We used to do it without permission. So it's not like she came over and said, hey, I want to sleep with all you guys.
Yeah.
We said, hey, man, that white girl like you. Get over here. And then we put,
shit.
yeah. We just come in with dicks out.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Oh.
A drag in the show. It's about if you're going to make a statement, back it up.
The raping thing was wrong. Like I just
What
didn't want
part
to
was
go back.
incorrect? Which
you
part
were,
was
you
incorrect?
were basically saying like a woman should just say no right then and there and leave. Not
Yeah,
all girls
they should.
can do that though.
Okay, but that's what they should do. That doesn't
That's
mean
what they
it's-
should do, but not all girls are able to.
Whose fault is that?
Whose fault is that?
Yeah.
I'm guessing us women, right?
Something that's not very helpful in the long run. I believe men actually deserve something a lot better and a lot more substantial than the basics, you know? For example, if I handed you a glass of water from Flint, Michigan, would you drink it? I mean, technically it's water, but when you look at the full picture, you'd think twice, wouldn't you? Also, if you take away the last two letters in Fagin, we'd still be talking about Myron. I remember Willie D and Ice Cube songs telling men not to be a gentleman or simp. I'm not sure who Willie D is because, you know, not a 70s baby, but I actually agree with Ice Cube on a few things. For example, check yourself before you wreck yourself, 'cause shotgun bullets are bad for your health. Straight facts. And also, bars! Him saying not to be a simp is a good shout, but I believe there's a time and place to be a gentleman. But I won't argue the semantics too much, because you know what Ice Cube has that Myron doesn't? A marriage that's lasted 31 years. That's almost as long as Myron has been alive. And he's got 5 kids, and probably grandchildren. In one word,
Family.
what I've never seen is Ice Cube sitting in a room with his bros and ranting about why women deserve less, you know? And I'll wager at some point during his 31 years of marriage, damn, that's impressive, he was probably a gentleman to his wife. And if you don't think so, I've got some tap water from Flint, Michigan to sell you. Street dudes had a different way compared to the singers. Yeah, I'm not so sure what that means. I don't get that. But the video shouldn't be about downing sisters, but it should be empowering to men. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that empowering men shouldn't be about putting women down, if that's indeed what you're saying in this last bit. Okay, third comment, and I think this one might actually be my favorite. This is the most disingenuous video I've ever watched on YouTube. Disgusting. Disgusting! Disgusting. And the logic that you use that men should blame themselves when they choose the wrong woman who put them on blast or divorces them, do you have the same logic with women who get divorced or left alone with a baby or even got abused? Is it their fault alone for choosing the wrong man? The most disingenuous video? No, it's not. And if it is, you're either extremely sheltered or you're being hyperbolic, you know, like a teenage girl on Tumblr. Like, oh my God, this is the worst thing I've ever seen. I can't even. That's how you sound in my head. Or, you know, there's a secret third possibility. Myron, is that you? Spurg once in the comments for yes. But seriously, the whataboutism is strong with this one. I can almost taste the seethe, you know, it's so thick in the air. You know, the fact that you're equating me questioning the choices of fictional characters in Myron's book.
They're talking about fictional characters. Fictional characters. Am I getting through to you at all?
To saying it's a woman's fault that she got abused in a marriage is Staggering. I don't understand it at all. It's such a weird jump in logic, man. Besides, it's Myron that says that sort of thing.
Whose fault is that?
But you know, I'll look past the coping spree and try to respond to you in good faith. If I read about a fictional woman who's on a third bad marriage because all of her husbands were heroin addicts, then yeah, I would absolutely call her choices into question. The point I was making was not a gendered one, in case you missed it. My actual point is, you're at every crime scene of your life, so if there are a lot of crimes, like 3 bad marriages, you might want to take a look inside yourself and ask yourself what you're contributing to the situation for it to keep perpetuating. And maybe that way you can take one step towards stopping the cycle, you know? Or alternatively, you can just purchase that one-way ticket to Copesville and just blame everybody else for your problems.
Am I so out of touch? No, it's the
woman.
we're wrong.
It's like they say, heavy is the head that eats the crayon. But yeah, that's it for the comments. Thanks for all your hot takes and comments, guys. It's been really good content. All joking aside though, I can understand why some would watch my last video and get defensive. We live in a time that's so insane that it's almost comical, and you know, a lot of people feel disenfranchised. Men are increasingly demonized in the world, and a lot of them yearn for belonging. And young men today feel desperate to be seen and feel like someone, anyone, understands their plight. Unfortunately, charlatans are going to take full advantage of this, and it looks as though that's what's happening with this red pill manosphere movement. I'm not the first to say it, and I'm definitely not going to be the last, but the red pill is literally modern day feminism for men. And in the same way that modern feminism has damaged a lot of young women and made them hate men or see them as a threat or a source of income, the red pill is damaging young men and makes them see women as a walking fleshlight or the reason for all their problems. These are 2 extreme sides to the same unhinged coin, and nothing illustrates this better than the recent debate between Pearl Davis and Ethan Klein. I don't know how those 2 people managed to get dressed in the morning, but somehow they're prominent advocates for feminism and the red pill movement. Neither of them know anything about the movements they're representing beyond the pre-programmed talking points, you know? And watching that debate was literally like watching 2 low IQ monkeys fling poop at each other. It was embarrassing. You know, in the ideal world, the manosphere people and all the crazy feminists, they would all pair up, shut up, just move to an island and just let the rest of us live. It's hard to determine which came first, as feminism has become an overcorrection to being subjugated by men back in the day. And now the red pill is an overcorrection to feminism getting so out of hand because it's run out of dragons to slay. So now they just run around talking about manspreading. And for all I know, maybe men being a bit tyrannical back in the day was an overcorrection to women being even more tyrannical way back before then. So anyway, back to the red pill. I do get why it exists, and maybe at some point in time, it was a real antidote to a problem that I'm not going to deny. But it's become so bloated with grifters, men that go around glassing women in the face.
You gotta endure.
And men who, at the time of recording this, are getting charged with sex trafficking.
Now, this might strike some viewers as harsh, but I believe everyone involved in this story should die.
But unfortunately, the followers are so lost in the source that they'll defend it all to the hilt just because Andrew Tate told them something basic like, go to the gym, and he has a Bugatti. Well, he doesn't have a Bugatti anymore. He's going to prison. He's going to be bottom G. You know, it's like ignoring all the stuff that Jimmy Savile did because he once told children to eat their vegetables. The red pill movement is so flimsy and weak that literally anyone could infiltrate it. Some dowdy-looking woman who doesn't even brush her hair can just slide in and regurgitate these people's talking points back to them and actually be able to make a living off the backs of men that need genuine help. And unfortunately, these men are so starved of love and understanding that they'll just nod along and go, oh my God, it's so based, so based. You know, I'm actually flabbergasted at how easy it would be to infiltrate the manosphere. I feel like women shouldn't vote. I think you should let your husband cheat on you, because if a woman has sex outside of marriage, it's cheating. But if a man does it, It's a handshake. I feel like abuse isn't real because I spoke to lots of random people in the street and one of the people was a lawyer, and he told me that most of the time it's the woman that starts the fight. So there's no such thing as abuse. Feminism is bad.
I agree with that.
I feel like society would be a lot greater if women just shut up. I mean, I know I'm a woman and I'm constantly talking, but I'm a hypocrite. You know how us women are. 3. 04s. I could keep going with this bit, but I feel like I made my point. So, yeah, I understand why some people might get defensive, but I'm just some woman on YouTube, so you probably won't listen to me unless I'm saying something you agree with. And, you know, I get that. Who doesn't like a bit of confirmation bias? Besides, I don't know what it's like to be single in the current year. I don't know what it's like to be a young man in the current year. Hell, I don't even know what it's like to be young in the current year. I could sit here and go on and on about the plight of men, something I can definitely empathize with but will never really fully understand. Or I could help shine a light on content creators who actually have a better insight than I ever will. One of them being Blessing Stranded. He's a young man who's going through life like we all are, but he seems to be trying to figure out what it means to be a young man in the current day. And, you know, watching his content, he comes across as someone who's looked into the abyss and had the abyss not only look back at him, but actually reach out and grab him by the throat. But instead of sinking down into the void, he's doing a lot of introspection and he comes across as someone who's genuinely trying to find the light. His content gives me, a woman, more of an insight to what goes on inside the mind of a young man today than Myron's content ever will. You know what? I'm just going to let the man speak for himself.
Because I honestly believe that masculinity is something that should be matured into. But if you don't understand how any of it works, that's not really possible. And I don't think that this is something that a lot of these manosphere spaces actually respect. The way they talk about masculinity, it's never really a tone of it being this beautiful thing that men have to grow into and be patient with. They talk about it like it's either a job or a suit that you put on to impress people. That it's a grind to the finish line. And that's all wrong to me.
The whole video is fantastic, by the way. I've linked it in the description. Please check him out. I really think this kind of content should be amplified. So now that I've got all that off my chest, let's get on with this book review. So chapter 3 and 4 are called The Old Contract and The New Contract, respectively. And basically, according to Myron, the old contract boils down to men provided resources and women provided sex and children. You know, the fact that this is how Myron views marriage makes me feel kind of sad for him, because it's apparent he's never experienced love in his life. But then I remember that Myron tried to offer an influencer a spot on his podcast if she'd sleep with him.
So when he said, I'm not trying to do anything platonic with you, it was completely left field for me because I was only thinking we were going to do some kind of fitness related content collab. And he said, no problem, I collab directly with girls I date, no pressure though. And I was like, so if we aren't dating, you don't want to collab? I'm just being honest and stand by it. I'm not collaborating with you unless we have sex. You have had sex with a bunch of dudes I know and aren't special.
And when she said no and put him on blast, he exposed her name on his podcast to his fans and told them to all go harass her.
For 2.5 months, I have been harassed by your following because you gave them my Instagram and you told them to go roast me.
I can't really delve into that situation, bro.
Well, of course you can. Brother, you DM'd her yourself.
Yeah, bro, because I know what that podcast means. It's done so much for my life.
But that's not my point. That's not my point. You understand that there's something unethical about taking a person's name and their thing and sending it to your fans so they can go harass the person?
That is 100% unethical. I can't lie about that.
She was pregnant at the time and she ultimately lost her baby from the stress.
I am not saying that you are single-handedly responsible for my baby dying What I am saying is that I took steps to avoid all kinds of stress. The only stress that has been out of my control is the harassment I've gotten from your followers in the sake of supporting your name. And now I'm being told that in a week or so, I'm gonna go into early labor and I might have 2 minutes to hold my baby before it dies.
And they still kept harassing her.
Myron needs to call off his army. He has had so much opportunity to do so, and he doesn't care to. It's not important to him. And now I've posted a prayer request post because of this situation with my child, and people are commenting saying they hope my baby dies. They're saying that I'm getting what comes to me because of karma and that I deserve this. There you go, Myron. There's your culture. There's your tribe. There are your people.
So I remember this thing that Myron did, and I think to myself, Myron can pound sand. So anyway, the new contract is basically women saying they don't need men and men are trash and down with the patriarchy, believe all women. And while I think that people that spout this rhetoric are also cringe, I can't help but think that maybe the men that these women have encountered in their lives are just like Myron, in which case it's totally understandable why they would say that. I love that Myron just dogs on crazy feminists when he behaves exactly like one. Isn't it ironic? Don't you think? So he digs a little deeper into the old contract, even though it's no longer in effect, apparently, but because it's inherent human nature. And he goes to say, and I quote, "No matter how much women hate the past or feminists detest tradition, there is no denying that men and women evolved over thousands of years to interact with each other in a certain way. These biological realities are reflected in the old contract, and no matter how much women would wish otherwise, they are inescapable." Yeah, like MLD's fist in a club if you're a Latina. Indeed, times have changed. Indeed, feminism has burned the old contract. Oh, you know, the old contract from the good old days. The good old days where it was totally acceptable to beat your wife with a tree branch no thicker than your thumb. If it got a bit thicker than your thumb, people start to, you know, raise a bit of an eyebrow, but anything below that was completely fine. In case you didn't know, that's where the term rule of thumb comes from, by the way. It's extremely worrying that Myron seems to romanticize the old contract from the old days, you know, when women were property at best and a punching bag at worst. The next page is him going on about how some people reject the new contract and insist on adhering to tradition. All joking aside, I know what he means by tradition, you know. One parent stayed in the home and looked after the kids. Well, the woman stayed in the home and looked after the kids, and the man went out and made an income to look after the family and keep a roof over everyone's head. But you know, in the year of our Lord 2023, that's the kind of choice you can only make if you're privileged. Now, everybody has to go out and work because inflation is a thing. Everything's more expensive. You know, you can't just buy a house on one income anymore. I mean, you can't even buy a house on two incomes. We're heading towards a future where no one's going to own anything and people are just stuck on a will. I get what Myron is trying to say here, why he romanticizes it, but you know, you can't ignore all the other stuff that came with it or the fact that it was a different time. It's just dumb to make the comparison from the 1950s to 2023. It's not the same time. It's not even the same world.
Ain't the same fucking ballpark. It ain't the same league. It ain't even the same fucking sport.
Most people have to go out and work to make a living, yeah? Most people don't have a choice to have one parent stay in the home, unfortunately. It's not a choice for most people. You know, I'd love to have my husband go out and work in a factory with asbestos and lead and very low safety regulations while I stayed home, baking and popping Quaaludes all day, waiting to endure my next beating because I burned the pot roast, you know, as per tradition. But unfortunately, Myron, we can't all live the American dream. He then spends a paragraph of this page bloviating about the fact that things are different now and people are mostly trying to figure it out for themselves. But Myron, with his wifeless ass, he's figured it out. That's why he wrote this pamphlet. Well done, Myron, you're a genius. The next paragraph is him just ranting about trans people and saying that women will never be like men, no matter what tattoo they get or whatever color they dye their hair. Yeah, I don't know either, man. He does go on to say that women and men are confused about their role in modern society, and I actually agree with that. There's just so many choices you can make in life now, and there will definitely be cases of choice paralysis. It's a real thing. I can't even choose a show on Netflix without going all cross-eyed and ultimately giving up and just watching nothing. So I imagine choosing a life path with so many choices can be a stressful nightmare. That's not what Myron's talking about though. His point is that men are still using the old tactics from the old contract to pursue women, but because of feminism, women have more freedom to rebuff those advances. According to Myron, back in the day, a time period he was actually never there to witness because he's just in his early 30s, so how would he know? You could buy a woman flowers and naturally she'd be inclined to enjoy them. Oh, I don't know, Myron. Maybe back then women were happy to get flowers because the alternative was being hit with a tree branch the width of the man's thumb. Unfortunately, these days, when you buy a woman flowers, you have to approach her in an appropriate manner, under the right circumstances. No longer can you follow her home or hide in the bushes outside her house.
Okay, don't just fucking pull down your pants and say, look at my dick. You gotta be sneaky.
For men to do these things is just human nature, and like Tom, Dick, and Harry in the last chapter, they're doing everything right. It's just the women who are wrong. But unfortunately, and I quote, those right things are in complete violation of the new contract, resulting in confusion and guaranteed failure. Geez, if Tom, Dick, and Harry are an example of men doing it right, I would hate to see men doing it wrong. So because of this new contract where women have a choice, right? Men's biology will be the seeds of their own destruction. So men have to learn to unplug from what they were wired and taught to do. Unplug. God, I hope that wasn't a Matrix reference. Again, we're reminded of the old contract, and Myron wants us to burn this into our brain. Men provided resources, and women provided sex. Remember it, learn it, etch it onto a piece of wood and have it nailed to your face. Myron does acknowledge that this way of thinking is transactional, but it doubles down and says that that's how reality actually is. The relationship between most men and women throughout all of history has been transactional. It has been prostitution. All men are Johns, and all women are whores. Jeez. I wonder if Myron sees all interaction between men and women this way because it's the only way he can interact with women. He only meets women off Instagram, sugar daddy websites, and strip clubs if he goes out into the real world. Myron, you can only get women who just want your money because your character is foul and you have nothing to offer in that respect. This doesn't make it the case for everybody, and for you to think so is nothing short of delusional. I remember you in the beginning of the book saying that your parents did a great job. Holy moly, I'd hate to see them do a terrible job. Myron goes on to say that all men's primary interest in any women is sexual, but if he's lucky, love might often be the result. So men be out here falling in love with whores. Is that what's happening? So what are you even saying here, Myron? He seems to backtrack a bit here, literally on the next page, where he says, women wanting a man to make certain amount of money before she commits, being a gold-digging whore, is a good thing for a man, saying, and I quote, financial stability lays a solid foundation to stabilize a relationship and, eventually, a family. So, is she a whore demanding a man make money? Not really. That insistence is hardwired and results in children and a family that brings tremendous joy, arguably the whole purpose of life itself. God, are you getting whiplash? I'm getting some serious whiplash. He goes on to say that women having lofty, impossible standards is what keeps men in check and inspires men to be innovative. And I quote, nearly every innovation or creation and almost all of society and civilization would not exist if women did not effectively insist men achieve some sort of level of excellence before having sex with them. Well, I guess that would explain your podcast, Myron. So without the women that you bring on to berate, you wouldn't make as much money off the Fresh and Fit podcast, would you? I don't know if Myron intentionally admitted that it wouldn't be shit without women, but credit where it's due. Well done for having what kind of looks like a bit of self-awareness, I suppose. Well done. He goes on to say in the book that in short, everything good, meaningful, and beautiful in life came from the old contract between men and women. Every human advancement, including family, love, technology, history, the arts, or civilization, comes from men trading resources for sex, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I don't know who this paragraph is more insulting to, men or women. On one hand, it's calling men a bunch of one-dimensional entities who would probably be sitting in their own filth if they didn't have somewhere to stick their penis sometimes. And on the other hand, it's saying that women are just walking, talking fleshlights who exist solely to get men to do things.
Women as lovers are basically the same. They just have to be there. Insert somewhere close, preferably moist,
thrust, repeat.
Flattering.
Myron genuinely thinks that this is what keeps society going, and that's a good thing. Oh, what a fucking hollow shell of a human being he is. We've got the next little section here. It's titled, Don't Deny Reality. It's a bit rich coming from you, Myron. He starts the section with a bit of projection.
That's a bar right there. Bars.
That any normal, healthy man would want that society that resulted from the old contract. You know, the one where women are whores and men are lazy. He goes on a bit of a rant about modernity, and you know, honestly, I get it. The way life is today is really unnatural for human beings all round, and I agree that things are indeed getting out of hand. But modernity hurts everybody, not just the men, and not just the women. Myron seems aware of the problem, but the kind of maths he's doing to pinpoint the source and find a solution is just not adding up. He blames modernity for why Tom, Dick and Harry messed up their lives, once again taking away the responsibility from them and dooming them to make the same mistakes again. He then ends the chapter by telling men not to give up like pussies, and that to deny nature leads to misery, and to learn to strike a balance, which is a lovely sentiment. But remember, all women are whores. Right, so chapter 4 covers the new contract in more depth, and it starts off by going off on Beyonce, which is absolutely fine by me because I can't stand her either. He calls her every feminist's favourite musician, which I find quite funny, but then he uses the fact that Jay-Z cheated on her and her staying with him for a case for hypergamy. I don't know, it's a pretty low rent argument, but it's Myron. He seems to hate it when women say, I don't need no man, and tells men to see this as a red flag, which I can kind of see that. But, you know, there might be some truth in it. Because the thing is, women can go around and say, I don't need no man. But basically, a hoe can be a hoe without a pimp, but a pimp needs hoes to be a pimp. Myron goes on to say, for nearly all of their existence, women needed men. While men would carve out their existence out of the real world through their action, women could not, making them wholly dependent on men. Consequently, women had to find a man to keep him happy. They had to dote on men, cook for men, have sex with men, even if they didn't want to, and take care of men. All of this lest they cared to die. Although you may have never done anything to keep a woman or have her somehow be dependent on you, their entire bioevolutionary history is one where they have, in one way or another, been owned or kept by men. And you know, when you put things like that, it kind of makes it sound like women were slaves, and it's kind of worrying that you're looking at this kind of past with rose-tinted glasses. Why do you seem so gung-ho about going back to this past where women were owned as property? Is it because it's the only way you can get a woman to stay with you? He goes on to lament women's liberation and pinpoints the start of the problem as the 19th Amendment, you know, where women got the vote and got the same financial and legal rights as men. He also blames no-fault divorce for the changes in women's attitudes over the generations. But for Myron, the biggest culprit was technology and capitalism. God, it sounds like a feminist. But wasn't it just in the last chapter that Myron was saying that advancement in tech and all the good things only happened because men got to have sex with women? So if women are whores and they banged their way to having legal rights, I say let them have it. They did the work. So basically, women stopped being second-class citizens and the Industrial Revolution happened, meaning there were more job options for women and they could be financially independent from men, finally, and not need men to survive. Oh no. Can you feel society crumbling? See, he then goes on a bit about capitalism fueling self-interest, and this led to welfare states. So now women have a safety net, and this meant they didn't really need men. And this, in Myron's eyes, absolutely ruined everything. And you know, as time went on, some women opted to marry the state instead of men, which is harder on the taxpayer, and I understand why Myron is molding at this to a point. But he doesn't consider there's a root cause for such a shift, and it isn't just capitalism and the welfare state. For example, and I quote, with no need for men, or so women think, women were allowed to choose the right man rather than be forced or coerced into accepting the wrong one. This transformed the contract between men and women from dependency and prostitution to that of choice and volunteerism. So now that women have rights, they can opt to not be coerced into a marriage of prostitution, as you like to call it, Myron, you know you're not really making a good case for tradition. And the further I get into your book, the more I understand why a lot of women would rather just stay away from men. I mean, if you're here romanticizing the old contract where women are whores and property, and you're teaching other men to think like this, how's this going to help society exactly? He then goes on to say that women having a choice should be good for male and female relations, but for some reason it's not. Maybe, Myron, it's because there are men like you out there romanticizing the old contract where women were property and writing books about why women deserve less. Maybe, just maybe, when women got right, it raised the bar for scrubs like you to become better to match the women. But instead of building your character, you just took the shortcut and made money off the backs of the men you swear up and down that you're helping. Gross. Myron's lamenting the fact that, and I quote, the sexes have abandoned one another instead of blissfully coming together. Myron ironically doesn't realize that him writing this book and basically the way he makes a living is contributing to what he calls here a dystopian nightmare. The absolute jackal. He then goes on to list a bunch of statistics, stating that marriage is at an all-time low and that more people are getting divorced. Well, you know, more divorce might happen if half of the relationship wasn't seen as fucking property, Myron. Oh, apparently family formation is down. Well, nigga, where's your family? You know what, I'll cut you some slack. Where's your wife? I don't see you putting your money where your mouth is. I personally don't think that you should breed. But if you're going to talk the talk, maybe you should walk the walk. Oh, and this right here might actually be one of my favorite statistics on here. It's from Tinder. Tinder. Yo, what do you mean there aren't a lot of relationships stemming from the app where you can order sex like it's a bloody pizza?
I am shocked. Shocked. Well, not that shocked.
Also, male virginity has tripled. But that's good for you, isn't it, Myron? You can keep these men in a state of anger and keep them undesirable to women so that you can have them all to yourself. Right, Myron? You see, the thing is, I'm not saying all these problems aren't legitimate. They are, but what Myron is doing is fostering that divide and getting paid. And here's another quote. Nearly every man today is accused of unconsciously being a sexist or a misogynist. No, Myron, that's just you. And people that think like you. You see, the men who don't go around ranting about why women deserve less don't get seen as misogynist. And men who don't use their dwindling clout to try and get women to sleep with them don't get called sexist, Myron. It's just you. And he goes on to say, you don't believe me? Watch my podcast when women foolishly call me a misogynist for stating an objective fact and the subsequent entertainment of asking them to define it after their false accusation. It is hilarious. You mean the podcast where you, a grown man, berate girls barely out of their teens? Yeah, it's not the flex you think it is, mate. Keeps dogging on feminism for a bit. Here's another quote. Feminism originally meant equality between men and women, but what has occurred is discrimination against men, which violates the definition of feminism. Hate is the result, as men and women have been pitted against one another. And you're here to profit off it, aren't you, Myron? You know, Myron, if most men were like you, I'd also be a man-hating feminist. In order to bolster his ridiculous point, he lists the most ridiculous aspects of feminism like the wage gap, microaggressions, catcalling, mansplaining, and manspreading. But you know what doesn't get mentioned? The rule of thumb. Yeah, I'm going to keep bringing it up. He accuses women of painting male behavior as a sin. Well, Myron, if male behavior is what you say it is, that is, men only doing things for sex, otherwise they just sit around and do nothing, then yeah, it's a fucking sin. In fact, it's two sins. It's literally sloth and lust, you dumbass. He tries to give the impression that he's taking some sort of responsibility here when he says, this doesn't mean that all men are innocent, but it seems women in society are trying to make being a normal man bad, toxic, or even criminal, which does nothing to improve male-female relations. Hey, Myron, you know what does nothing to improve male-female relations? Your podcast. This creature then has the absolute nerve to mention false rape accusations when he's literally laughed and joked with a rapist on his podcast, saying that false accusations do nothing to foster loving relationships between men and women. You know what? You telling women on your podcast that it's their fault if they get raped also does nothing to foster loving relationships between men and women. And here he says, admittedly, a lot of this is amplified by the internet to look worse than it is. The clickbait nature of social media, as well as the dinosaur mainstream media, always promotes train wrecks over happy stories. You realize that's what this book is doing, right? Is this self-awareness? No, it's not self-awareness, because he goes on to say that his anecdotal evidence is corroborated by stats. Yeah, trust me, bro. Imagine writing a book complaining about the problems that you're literally helping to worsen. Unbelievable. So yeah, he spends the rest of the chapter molding, saying, we gave you women everything, like rights and independence. Didn't women have to fight for that? Makes a massive list of stuff that men have given women, like McMansions and date nights. Because imagine having to make an effort and having a date with your significant other. But yeah, apparently men gave us all these things, like Hassan Abi and lower standards, and they're still miles off. And he ends the chapter by saying, we're only left to conclude that we missed something big, something huge, something so glaring and obvious it must have been staring us right in the face this entire time. And we almost certainly did. Well, Myron, if you went and stood in front of a mirror right now, you'd certainly see what the problem is. Except you won't, because your head is shoved up your ass. And yeah, that's the end of that chapter. God, thank fuck for that. Holy moly, that was a lot of waffle. Like, there wasn't even one bit of coherent thought. And the lack of self-awareness in Myron is just, I can't get my head around it. It's amazing. You know the saying, be the change you want to see in the world? Well, Myron has done the opposite, and he's decided to be the problem that he sees in the world. But hey, at least he's making money off of it. Holy crap, going through that gave me a bit of a headache. So, I'm just gonna end it here, mate. That was incredibly draining. Yeah. So until next time.
Sayonara!